So you see, a while back, my buddy Honest Biggums and I took a look at the PS3, Xbox 360, PS2, and Wii, or if you will, Sonic Unleashed versions of, well, Sonic Unleashed. And though we briefly mentioned the mobile phone version of that game, we made a point of not talking about it much for a good reason. Now you see, that wasn't simply so I'd have an excuse to make this video here today. No. I legitimately just didn't have a good way of really playing or recording this game. See, this is a mobile phone version of Sonic Unleashed, and when I say mobile phone, I don't mean that this title was released for iOS or Android devices. Nope, this was released for things like mid-2000s era Nokia phones. It's a Java 2 platform mobile edition game, or J2ME for short. J2ME games were certainly something, weren't they? Games like Mega Man Rush Marine, which was essentially just a Mega Man themed shoot 'em up. Anyone else play this one? And of course, a kick-ass version of Tetris that was so good, or at least I remember it being so good. I haven't played in years, that it managed to keep me occupied while I camped out in my closet back at my parents' house in Texas during Hurricane Ike. As for the mobile version of Sonic Unleashed, I had no idea this thing existed until a couple of years ago. In fact, until Christian Whitehead's incredible 2011 release of Sonic CD for mobile devices, my only real mobile experience with the Sonic series was a terrible port of Sonic 2 that I played my first ever flip phone. I don't really remember what it was just some weird thing that my mom got for free with a Sprint contract. So playing this version of Sonic Unleashed was also easier said than done. Due to the nature of my work both on and off YouTube, I have to use a MacBook. And as far as I can find, there are no decent J2ME emulators for Mac. So guess what? This old mobile game was recorded using an emulator on my Android smartphone. So after much trial and error, fiddling with emulation settings, and ultimately finding that the most stable version of this game was available in some language that I'm completely unfamiliar with, I managed to get it up and running. And before we go on, I'd like to give a good shout out to my buddy Minimme for really helping me figure out how to emulate this thing. Seriously, he's the go-to guy for J2ME stuff in these parts of YouTube, and he really makes some fantastic content, so definitely check him out. So with that, today on Stuff We Play, let's take a look at Sonic Unleashed for mobile phones. Upon booting up, we're greeted with, well, a MIDI-sounding rendition of the Sonic Unleashed opening music. I think it might be MIDI. It sounds similar in instrumentation to Sonic Genesis for the GBA, though of course the actual compositions here are actually pretty well done. And I can actually say that about all the music tracks in Sonic Unleashed Mobile. It's just a shame then that the music sometimes just randomly stops during levels. That's a weird thing I'd like to mention here right off the bat. There's some weird inconsistencies with this game depending on which version you're playing. Because oh yes, there are different versions that were released that are slightly different depending on what type of mobile phone you had. I've heard reports of some people playing this game there being no music at all, but also reports of music that loops and plays with no issues. But then I also remember SomeCallMeJohnny mentioning in his Sonic Unleashed video that music only played for him during cutscenes. As for me, the versions of this game that I've played have fallen into two categories. The first of those were in the same category as the version played by SomeCallMeJohnny and were in English but also kept crashing on me. So the one that I ultimately played and recorded for this video is this one, where we get music but it doesn't loop properly and I have no idea what any of these menu options say. I really don't know what language this is in. But wait, to quote DJ Slopes, we may be getting a little ahead of ourselves. How did we even end up with a mobile phone version of Sonic Unleashed? I present to you Gameloft. Founded in 1999 by Ubisoft co-founder Michel Guillemot, Michel Guillemot? I butchered that. But this French game studio is best known for creating the Asphalt Racing series, which at one point I swear was on every iPhone in sight. They were also an early supporter of the Nokia N-Gage, and, you know, somehow they're still in business. I guess miracles are possible. Speaking of the N-Gage, I should mention that Unleashed Mobile wasn't actually the first Sonic game to ever be released for a mobile device. The earliest one I could find was Sonic N for the N-Gage, which was just a mobile port of Sonic Advance for the Game Boy Advance that, thanks to horizontal screen crunch, is just kind of a meh experience overall. At some point though, this version of the game would see a port to J2ME, along with iOS and Android ports, with the J2ME version being handled by, you guessed it, Gameloft. So seeing as Sonic N was handled by Sega themselves, why they later turned to Gameloft for games such as the J2ME version of Sonic Unleashed? Well, there's a few reasons that I can think of. Keep in mind, this is speculation though. After the failure that was Sonic 06, or as my buddy Honest Biggums calls it, the accident, Sega probably wanted all hands on deck to make sure that Sonic Unleashed would leave an impact. And not just any impact, but a mostly positive one. However, even then, this was just in regards to the HD version of Sonic Unleashed for the PS3 and Xbox 360. As for the PS2 and Wii Sonic Unleashed versions, Sega outsourced those to Dimps, who's in charge of the Sonic Rush series and before that the Sonic Advance series. In fact, if you want to get technical, Dimps technically got their start with the Sonic series back with Sonic Pocket Adventure for the Neo Geo Pocket Color, a game that was made by a lot of staff who would later go on to form this studio. In that case, even though the game was being outsourced, it was clearly in good hands. I think then that a parallel to an extent can be drawn between Dimps and Gameloft in the case of Sonic Unleashed. Gameloft was the go-to company for J2ME tie-ins of AAA games, as can be seen with successful titles like the J2ME versions of Driver, Splinter Cell, and Prince of Persia. And thus, sometime in 2008, a deal between Sega and Gameloft was struck up, and in June 2009, this game was released to the world. Which seems odd for a tie-in game, as Sonic Unleashed itself was released all the way back in November of 2008. This gets even odder when you realize that, despite being formally announced by Sega and Gameloft at E3 2009, and again, why not announce a mobile tie-in game before the release of your main attraction, this version of Sonic Unleashed ultimately only saw a release in Europe, Australia, and New Zealand. To say this is weird is to put it lightly, though to be fair, if it was only going to be released in one region, the traditional PAL region does make sense, seeing as, well, Gameloft is based in France. So that brings us back to Sonic Unleashed Mobile itself. After selecting this option right here, which I think is the start game option, we're thrust right into this pocket-sized Sonic world. As you could likely imagine, I have no idea what's going on in any of the cutscenes here, but I think I have the basic gist of the story. Dr. Eggman is a bad man, but Sonic is a good boy. Sonic tries to stop Eggman, but gets turned into a 1930s horror movie character. Thus, it's up to you as resident good boy to stop this bad man by traveling around the world, visiting various temples to give power to the mysterious Chaos Emeralds, transform between a hedgehog form and a werehog form between stages, which, varies by night and day and whatnot, and then ultimately, of course, stopping the Mad Doctor. It hits most of the same beats that were in Unleashed proper, and if you want to see that covered in depth, then go watch my video on the HD version of Sonic Unleashed. That said though, that the ultimate big bad of the HD and Unleashed versions, Dark Gaia, is nowhere to be seen here. Oh, weird. Regardless, this version of the game hits most of the same story beats as its bigger budget counterparts, even if each of the locales here are visited in a different order. The levels here are as follows. There's the Chinese-inspired Chunan, the Greek-inspired Apatos, the Italian, I guess, inspired nation of Spagonia, and the African nation of Missouri, which I know sounds as if it should be somewhere in the States, but trust me, it's African-based. And that's it. People complained about Missouri and Empire City being cut from Sonic Unleashed, but clearly they didn't realize that the mobile version only has half of the worlds that were in the HD version. That said though, there is some unique stuff here. Instead of each world having one main hedgehog and one main werehog stage, as in the HD version, each world here is more traditionally structured, containing 3 acts and a boss at the end of each of them. Opposite of the Wii version, which had more of an emphasis on the werehog than Daytime Sonic, this version very clearly has more of its 11 stages dedicated to Daytime Sonic than the werehog. And that's okay. I mean, graphically speaking, it's somehow a bit worse looking than Sonic Advance, which, released 8 years prior, but for a J2ME game, it's perfectly fine. And honestly, as far as gameplay goes, it's not terrible either. Daytime Sonic can run, jump, and perform a boost forward which will take out anything in his path, unless he gets crushed, falls into a pit, or, hits a bed of spikes. And honestly, it feels like a variation of his control scheme in the Sonic Rush games. Of course, you have a set number of lives, and if you want to not die whenever you take a hit, you gotta collect rings. As for the werehog, he runs and jumps as well, but is a bit slower and has some beat 'em up-esque combos that can be used to take down enemies. While he's definitely a bit slower than Daytime Sonic, the differences between the two playstyles here aren't nearly as drastic as in the HD version or Sonic Unleashed, and honestly, the werehog doesn't feel out of place at all here. The only problems I have really, control-wise, are with the actual control input method. Though you can technically play emulated versions of this game using a proper controller, as, through emulation all things are possible, so jot that down. I kept in mind for this video that most people either played this on a clunky Nokia phone with a slide-out keyboard, an early smartphone, or through an unofficial Android port I saw floating around the internet but couldn't ever actually get to run. As such, I spent the majority of my time playing this game using the default touch controls, and honestly, that's less than optimal. Now though, touch controls can be done well with Sonic games. Christian Whitehead and Simon Tomley's ports of Sonic CD 1 and 2 for iOS and Android devices all run phenomenally well and are a blast to play even with the default touch controls. But even then, I think they're even better when played with a compatible smartphone controller. So as for Sonic Unleashed Mobile, which trust me isn't nearly as polished as the Whitehead and Tomley ports of Sonic CD 1 and 2, playing it with the touch controls is a little rough. My emulator is set up to mimic the keypad and buttons that you'd find on a flip phone. As some commands involve you pressing buttons such as the 5 key or whatever, I can already say that on real hardware, this game would be jank as hell to play, even is still better than most other J2ME platformers. While it's better using the touch controls here on the emulator, it's still not perfect. Sometimes, particularly when I had to do tight platforming, I swear I'd jump but instead the controls would lock and push me in the direction I was trying to jump, or, overshoot me or run me off an edge. It just didn't feel right. As short and weird and cut down out of order as this game is compared to Sonic Unleashed proper, it's definitely not a bad game. The controls mostly work, and honestly the issues I mentioned aren't actually enough to be a deal breaker. From what I heard, it was quite janky in its original form, but also quite well received as far as J2ME platformers go. And honestly, as it's no longer available to download in its original form, I think I can easily recommend emulating this one. My emulator of choice here was J2ME Loader for Android, and honestly, it ran without a hitch, even if it ended up draining my battery life like nothing else. So as I said, this is by far the weirdest Sonic game I've ever taken a look at, but you know what? It's pretty cool. Despite all of its weird flaws and whatnot, for an old school cell phone game, it's not half bad. And honestly, I actually had a decent bit of fun playing this. It's not incredible, but it's pretty fun. So before we end up, I do have a couple of announcements. First off, if you're in Houston, Texas this weekend, I'll be at Retropalooza Houston along with Elliot. We'll actually be there hanging out with friends like my good buddy G from G to the Next Level. It's going to be great. It's fun. We go every year. If you see us there, definitely say hi. I may look weird because I'm debating shaving the beard or something because, hey, it's summer. Gotta get a summer look, right? And speaking of summer events, I'm also going to be hosting an event known as Trash Games for Charity. It's going to be a live stream charity event featuring myself and a bunch of other local YouTubers and streamers, streamed on this channel, but also hosted locally at Epic Games and More in Quadra Village in Victoria, BC. So if you're local, definitely swing by and say hi, and if not, then definitely catch the stream online. And of course, as usual, I'd also like to give a good shout out to some of our patrons, mainly the Golden Bolt and Justin Chipman. Seriously, if you want to support us on Patreon, that's great, because these folks really, their support means the world. So, what's the weirdest Sonic game you've ever played? Let me know down in the comment section below. And while you're at, subscribe to Cellphone for more great content like this. And with that, thank you very much for watching. Stay classy, and I'll see you next time.